everybody, I'm John Halpin. Welcome to Broadhead HMH Agency's Future of Transportation podcast. I'm here to continue our series of chats with experts in the transportation industry. And with me today is Lea Malloy, Head of Electric Vehicle Battery Solutions at Cox Automotive. Lea, thanks a lot for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Glad to be here, John.
Yeah, this is a topic I've actually been dying to talk with someone about. So I'm glad this worked out. And I'm going to have tons. So I know people say there's no stupid questions, but there might be stupid questions. I can't promise that. So we'll see how things go.
Sounds great.
Okay. So actually, I have one early question. When people find out what you do for a living, it's interesting now. It's very topical, right? In addition to being interesting. Is there a question you get asked more than anything else? Like, is there a common, is it what kind of car should I buy? Is it what are batteries like? Is there anything that kind of sticks out? And I don't want to put you on the spot with this one, but I'm curious.
The things that stick out, I think the good news is, right, we're over the bubble of our EV is going to be around for a while. And now there's questions about when should I buy? Will range improve? Do you have any insights on when charging infrastructure is actually going to be, sufficient to support my needs? Those types of questions. Got it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure you're going to, and that's not going to stop for you for a while as people adopt. So that's good. So EV, you talked about getting over that hump. EV market share is expected to grow nearly 7 times by 2030. I think I got that from one of your presentations,
yes.
Actually. Can the battery industry keep up with the demand that it's going to see over the next, 5 to 10 years?
In the short term, absolutely. But I think you've asked the right question because it ultimately, is a supply chain constraint. And, there's been a lot of great articles about the rise of the electric vehicle and, they consume more chips than your normal combustion vehicle. But, most importantly, they have a big battery pack and those battery packs require cells, and those cells are produced at gigafactories. And in order to make a cell, you need the right critical minerals in the right amounts. So everything has to be kind of firing on all cylinders. So, the U.S. Is set to bring 13 gigafactories online by 2025, which will go a long way to our, resiliency of our U.S. supply chain. A lot of the action takes place today in China, more so growing in Europe, but it is a key constraint and one that could potentially meter the pace at which EV adoption accelerates.
Gotcha. Okay. How does, Cox Automotive, you don't make batteries, no. Right? You have another contribution to the solutions surrounding this issue. Can you kind of explain what they are?
I'd love to do that. So where I get to focus my time working with a really talented team of problem solvers and innovators is around EV battery caretaking. So the industry has given a lot of energy and focus to new electric vehicle production. But the less considered component of EV production is what to do with these vehicles once they're out in the wild, and specifically, what does caretaking of an EV battery look like? So that is where my organization and my team's primary focus is. So we do everything from storage to logistics, and none of those things are easy given the size and characteristics of an EV battery. But where we specialize is in first life extension or EV battery repair or remanufacture. And we also do end of life EV battery recycling as well. So if it's not a candidate for repair, we're able to properly dispose of that battery pack and create black mass for use in the next battery cell.
Okay. So you talked I want to address first life extension first. So now a lot of the manufacturers are doing 8-year, 100,000-mile warranties on batteries. Is that about the standard?
That's the norm. 8 to 10. Yep.
Okay, so now how do you? So you basically what you're saying is that we're trying to make batteries that last longer? Is first life extension? Is that a good description of first life extension, or am I missing it?
We approach it with OEMs and in partnership with their dealer network. We help service and support a battery that might be sick. So we offer certified repair, remanufacturing refurbishment routines if that
Mhm.
battery pack is in warranty. We also do similar work if that pack is out of warranty. And in the near future, that's going to be, a growing consideration. But it's less about the upfront design, more about now
Okay.
that battery is out in the wild, how can we work, with OEMs and dealers to make sure that battery pack, lives its fullest first life. So what of all this is that, repairing an EV battery pack reduces what consumer spends to replace it by almost 50%. And it also makes environmental sense because you're not going back to the earth to mine new minerals to produce a new battery cell. So the more that we can repair and extend the first life of that battery pack, the better. Makes economic and environmental sense.
Okay. Because EV batteries are not cheap to replace, right?
That is completely accurate. And the EV battery pack drives anywhere from 30 to 40% of the value of a new electric vehicle. So we're talking big dollars here, right?
Yep.
So we want to do all we can to extend that first life. And even when it's at the end of its automotive life, we offer options for repurposing into energy storage before we jump to recycling.
Got it. Okay, so I want to ask more about energy storage at the end of life. So can you explain? I've read some about this, but I know you can articulate this way better than I could. So I have this EV battery, and after however many years, it's not necessarily suitable for a vehicle anymore. What happens to it, and what do you want to help happen to it so that it can be environmentally friendly, not go to waste, etc.?
Good question. So usually an EV battery is deemed end of life for automotive purposes when its capacity reaches about 80%. So then you've got some options. Do I repurpose it into energy storage or do I recycle it? And the way the industry works today is I'd say energy storage is a growing application, but still somewhat of a niche play here in the US, where you have to first diagnose the health of that battery in combination with, a whole bunch of other batteries that you would just deploy into this energy storage system. And then you need to have a buyer who purchases those batteries and does the right software configurations to make sure that they'll work and can talk to each other appropriately in this new application of energy storage. But it is an important way to, one, extend those useful lives of those batteries and also provide more, stability around energy storage so that we can, improve things like peak level shaving so that key energy consumption times can be offset with stored energy so that the grid is not taxed. So I think we'll see more to come in the future with energy storage and ways to sort of peak shave, as the industry calls it. But we're, I'd say, in the early days of that in the US.
Got it. What are the most common applications for energy storage like that?
They vary. I mean, you have seen examples where in Europe, it drives lighting for sports stadiums. You could have another use case where even, a homeowner uses it to power their home. So I think it runs the whole gamut. Right now, it can be a little bit costly, again, to ensure that the batteries are talking to each other, that they have the right software, and also that those batteries are maintained. So that's, I think, one of the innovations that is needed around energy storage is just ways to improve the cost utilization of those packs.
Okay. Backing up a little bit to the manufacturing of the batteries, are they, one, let's say, this might be a misconception, and I'd love to talk about it, about EV batteries being not so environmentally friendly to manufacture. How much of that is true, and how is that improving? Because it seems to be improving, right?
Yeah, well, and I'd say, it depends, right? There's been a lot of research about the carbon impact to produce an electric vehicle versus a combustion vehicle. Wall Street Journal to MIT. And, common belief is that to produce an electric vehicle, there is a larger, quote, carbon tax than to produce a combustion vehicle, because you're mining minerals from the earth to produce the battery pack, and it just therefore takes more energy. Where you start to see benefits is after, say, 20,000 miles or so are accrued on that vehicle. And assuming that clean energy is used to power that vehicle, if it's an electric, about 20,000 miles, you'll reach a tipping point where the carbon footprint of an electric vehicle will improve and exceed that of a combustion vehicle. But it does take a little while to get there.
So with Tesla owning it for a little while, now the big auto OEMs are making big strike. Basically, I'm thinking of the GM all in from last year from the Super Bowl ad actually was the word we saw. But basically GM and Ford and so many others are getting into this space because the tipping point has sort of come, like you referenced earlier. Will the big auto manufacturers, will they take over this space soon? Like, will they kind of, I don't know about leave Tesla in the dust because Tesla's pretty big, but are GM and Ford going to muscle a lot of companies out?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? And Tesla has the installed base. They have over 60% share of new EV sales, but that share is declining. And that decline, I believe, is inevitable, right? As you have more entrants to market and more models with more body styles at different price points. So, what we see today is that, Ford, GM, Hyundai brands are certainly leading the pack with the Mach-E, the Bolt, the Ioniq 5, and even Kia with their EV6. But in comparison, 1 out of every 10 vehicles is sold that's either a GM, Ford, or Hyundai versus a Tesla. So there's a long way to go in the industry. But I'm optimistic that we'll continue to see more consumer choices, and that's really where the industry will benefit.
Right, because people won't. I mean, the prices will go down with more choice for sure. That's one thing, right? So
yeah, for sure. And I think each organization has different challenges to overcome. What some of the new EV OEMs have going for them, right, is they have a complete blank slate for software, for supply chain. But the opposite side of that coin is that what's new is not always easy, especially in the supply chain world. It might be easier to write your own technology, but if you can't procure the parts, that's a challenge as well. So they're just trading cost and benefits.
Okay. One thing I've talked about on this show that in the past year that I loved was about the Ford F-150 Lightning. So that was a big innovation because for background for people who don't know it, the Ford F-150 Lightning, not only do you charge your electric truck, but now the energy in that truck can charge other things. It can charge your camping tools. It can charge your work tools. It can charge your house, things like that. So there's two-way charging there. What other innovations that am I going to encounter along, let's say, the next 5 years that I think are really cool like that one? Are there other ones that maybe people aren't that familiar with that you see coming that you know about?
Yeah, I think there's lots. I think as an industry, we can expect a lot of innovation, but something that's near and dear to me is just innovation that supports equitable EV adoption. And it might be innovation and access to charging infrastructure, access to used electric vehicles. I think for a true healthy marketplace, we need to make sure that EV adoption is equitable. And then truly on the technology side, I think all the innovation, focus for the most part is around the battery pack. Can it run safer? Can it run more efficiently? How can we have, the lowest carbon footprint? So I think we'll continue to see innovation there around, cathode, anode, electrolyte separator technologies. And I also hope to see innovation in charging infrastructure. Bidirectional charging is key. I think we need to evolve there. Back to my earlier point on energy storage to make sure that we have a sustainable, optimized grid. But I also think that the innovation that we can expect in the future will be combined with connectivity, autonomy as well. So the EV will evolve as a computer on wheels. And, you will see in the near future this truly autonomous, connected electric and shared vehicle.
Got it. Okay. How are municipalities impacting electrification? I mean, I know it's probably more so in other countries than this one that standards are stricter in some European cities, I would imagine, right? Or so I've heard and read and things like that. How are municipalities helping to drive this adoption? Are the standards getting stricter and kind of forcing, let's say, fleets, for instance, into this space maybe even earlier than they might have?
Yeah, I think municipalities have proven to be, quote, a great proving ground for electrics. And there are nearly 4 million vehicles owned by municipalities and states today. So there's a pretty good base to work with. And I think it's a great training grounds of sort to prove out, some key assumptions. Yes, with the electric vehicle, there's a lower total cost of operation. It's reducing emissions within a community, and you have that real give back to the community. In addition to, from an operator perspective, you're saving time, not going to the pump, reduced time spent on maintenance activities. And, Argonne National Lab has a great tool to support analysis for municipalities of, how should I convert my fleet? What types of vehicles are candidate, and the carbon offset improvements of doing that. And of course, with the Inflation Reduction Act, we are starting to see incentives for both new and used to make EVs more accessible, both on the consumer, but also the fleet level.
Got it. Okay. Related to municipalities, are the Euros ahead of us in adopting EVs?
I would say from an EV adoption perspective, Western Europeans are absolutely ahead of us. But we can attribute that to probably a handful of things, in some cases, just higher income levels, maybe more eco-conscious populations. And most importantly, likely is just strong government support in the form of incentives for vehicle purchases, but also in some cases sticks, right? Like low or no emission zones. But you couple that with really robust charging infrastructure networks, and I think that has turned into a home run for many European countries.
Okay, I was actually going to ask you, what can we learn from them, and what can we implement? It sounds like that last part is the place where we can learn and move forward better, right?
I think certainly, the charging infrastructure is something we need to address as a nation. Of course, it's harder because there's just more miles to cover, and it's certainly those zones, outside of metropolitan areas, which prove tricky from a utilization perspective. And I think the good news is that the American populace is really starting to understand the challenges associated with climate change. And I think we as a nation are stepping with our best foot forward to say we are committed to taking any steps reasonable to improve the environment.
Okay. So when I get I keep telling everybody that comes on this show with me that when we talk about EVs, when I get mine, which is going to be soon, it's not yet, but it's soon. When I charge, I'm not going to charge. Someone said to me, he was the CEO for a company called Beam Global, which does solar powered charging station stuff. And what he said was, we've got to get away from the fill up mentality and go to the top off mentality. Does that sound right to you?
Potentially, though. And here's why I'll say potentially, because I think as Americans, right, we know through our car purchase data that we purchase the vehicle for the exception. We buy the big SUV because we go to the beach every year. We go to grandma's every Christmas. And kind of similarly, that there's a mental, there's a mindset that we always have to have a full tank. Mm-hmm. So caught up in that somewhere is, I think it's better for the environment if our population can get comfortable with the fact that you may not need a 400-mile range. Heck, you don't even need a 200-mile range. You could probably do 95 to 98% of what you need to do with, a 100-mile range. So I think that's key point number one. And then point number two is related to charging practices. It is a best practice not to charge your vehicle every day. It's best if you, maybe charge it up to 80%, run it down to 20%. And of course, that doesn't really mirror real life. But unlike, where you charge in your cell phone or you plug in your cell phone and charge it daily, hourly, and leave that plugged in, you really don't want to do that with your electric vehicle from what we know today about battery degradation.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, you probably don't want to do that with your phone either, but people,
but
I agree.
It's more easy to replace. Yeah.
But to what you just said about the range, it's interesting because people, the furthest I drive my car other than maybe twice a year is to and from work, which is for me less than 20 miles. And a lot of people are closer than that. And, people go, I got to have 250 miles. I don't want that. I want the 350 miles. And it's just kind of not, is waste of money too strong a thing to say to buy the car with the bigger range?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. But, what I'd like to impress is it's also just this unnecessary environmental tax, right? I mean, we have a fixed amount of capacity today for mining certain metals like cobalt, manganese, lithium. There's more reserves, and we'll get access to those over time, but that mining and refining process takes a lot of time. So if we can train ourselves early to just use what we need, we'll be able to manage the supply and demand better.
Needs and wants. That's a tough conversation for a lot of people, I think. But yeah, you're right. So can I ask now, related to that, the difference between a battery with a 250-mile range and a battery with a 350-mile range? What are the, without getting too deep into the details, what are the ramifications of actually creating the battery? Is it bigger? Is it different composition? Like, how does that work?
Good question. And there is no universal answer. Typically, the battery would be bigger, meaning you'd have more cells connected into modules or sections. But the battery chemistry also plays an important role. And back to your innovation question, there's this kind of tension, healthy tension is the best way to say it, between a couple of common characteristics of a battery. So energy density, power, safety, life, and different metals used in the cathode will yield different outcomes. So cost is obviously an important dimension as well. So currently, one example is you see the industry transitioning from a common battery chemistry, NMC, to something called LFP, less nickel content, which is cheaper, more iron content in LFP. LFP is a great use case for commercial vehicles. It has a longer lifetime, more energy dense, and less costly. So you're seeing the industry tinker with the different cells used in battery packs for either commercial or fleet consumption.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. One question, not necessarily about the other things we've been talking about. What under the radar, are there companies in the transportation industry in general? It could be batteries, it could be EVs, it could be something completely different. Are there any game changers out there? You see a company doing something really cool, really innovative, you go, wow, I really like that, and I think there's a bright future in what they're doing?
Great question, and I think there's tons of innovation. But for a moment, I'm going to just highlight what we do here at Cox Automotive Mobility, because I believe we're under the radar in terms of a game changer for the whole transportation industry, and we fly under the radar, I believe, because we are predominantly B2B. So while we might not be as well known to the consumer, we are enabling the consumer through our focus on empowering the next generations of fleets. So that means that your goods coming to your door, one or two times a day is going to get there on time, and the commercial vehicles that are powering those deliveries are well maintained and supported in their transition to electric. And if you drive an electric vehicle, we obviously want to play an important part in supporting that electric vehicle battery and making sure it has its best first life as well. So, within that context, Cox Automotive Mobility is doing a ton to innovate across the industry and help the industry electrify. Excellent.
Okay. I love that. This is the fascinating space, and I'm so glad we got to talk about it. Okay. Folks, you can learn more about Cox Automotive at its website, coxautoinc.com, and on social media platforms such as LinkedIn and Twitter. Lee, thank you so much for your time. I'd love to talk longer. I'd love to do it again sometime.
Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're watching or listening. It'll help us get the word out, and we'd really appreciate it. To learn more about Broadhead HMH, the Transportation Transformation Agency, visit hmhagency.com or find us on all those usual social platforms that I mentioned. For Lea Malloy, I'm John Halpin. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with a new episode of the Future Transportation Podcast.